Okay, let's call the meeting to order. It's 9:02. I'm going to start out with the land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we are undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people today. So with that, we're officially launched. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda that's in everyone's package? Lori, seconded by Jeannie. Okay. On the consent agenda, we have a lot of material to go through once again. So I've had a discussion with Lisa, and the consent agenda, there's not a tremendous amount new. Anybody can certainly ask questions of anything they've read in there, but we'll take it as read. We have a couple of approvals to go through. We have to approve our work plan, which is an annual exercise, and as well as our external audit plan, and then one funding request. So why don't we start out with the Farm Committee work plan and annual mandate review, Lisa, and get that approved, and then move on to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. So I'll turn it over to you to just give us the brief update on that. I know this is an annual exercise.
Kevin, can I just ask you to confirm there's no conflicts of interest?
Oh yeah, I forgot the conflicts of interest, right? Number 3. Does anyone have any conflicts to declare? Okay. Seeing none, back to my last statement. Lisa.
Great, thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. So item 4B, the Farm Committee work plan and annual mandate review. The work plan, which is for 2023, is consistent with prior years, and that it maps the quarterly committee meetings to the responsibilities that are outlined in the mandate to ensure that all the key areas are covered off. As the committee is aware, and for the benefit of those listening, the core responsibilities of the Farm Committee cover such areas as external and internal auditor appointments, approval of audit plans, as well as oversight of financial reporting, internal controls, financial planning, enterprise risk, project risk, fundraising, and environmental social governance, among other items. Definitely a hardworking committee. This work plan is presented for approval today. And in addition, and in line with good governance, the mandate of the committee is also to be reviewed annually, and a copy is available in Board FX, and Charmaine is able to put it up on the screen if required as well. Subject to any changes proposed by the committee, management is not proposing any changes at this time. We did have quite a detailed review of the committee mandate 2 years ago, and so no approval was proposed for the mandate, just for the work plan. Happy to take any comments, questions from the committee.
Okay. Seeing none there, the resolution there is on the bottom page. Can I get that, Drew? Seconded by Lori. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Aye. That's carried. We turn now to the minutes of our November meeting. Right there. Oh, they're right there. I think everyone's seen them. Any comments on the minutes? If not, Jeannie, can I get a motion to approve those? Yep. Seconded. Lori, all in favor? Okay. And as I said, the macro dashboard, I'm going to take that as read. There isn't a lot of changes in the finance or pardon me, administration dashboards, the audit dashboard. So I'm going to go right to, unless there's questions, I'm going to go, pardon me, I'm fighting a cold here. I'm going to go right to Sampatta with the update on the financial statements. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Kevin.
There you are.
Do you want to just go to page, I believe, 46, Charmaine? Yeah, so these are the interim financial, what I'm presenting are the interim financial statements for the 9 months ended December 31st, 2022. These are unaudited and for information only. Like I do every quarter, I just like to go through some key items in the statements which might be of interest to the committee. So the first item is cash and Cash and investments, basically, so cash and investments are at 64 million compared to 90 million at March 31st. And this is only because we are drawing down on the working capital for the for Portland's. We haven't requested anything from the city for this 9 months yet, and we don't expect, or we don't anticipate to ask anything from the city, request anything from the city this year. Of the receivables of 25 million, almost 14 million of those pertain to the city, and they're mostly for the Lakeshore Bridge project. Of the 14 million, we have already realized 10 million, and the 4 million actually is a receivable based on an estimate that we had accrued. We haven't invoiced that to the city. We don't see any concern over there. We invoice, and the city is pretty regular in paying those payments, making those payments. With respect to restricted cash, the increase is only as a result of the holdbacks, construction holdbacks for the Portlands, and they will be released in due course. You see an item, assets under development, which are basically a portion of our expenditures for the 9 months ended December 31st. We have spent a total of 252 million this in the 9 months. A portion of which was reflected in the assets under development. A portion is reflected in the capital assets by way of the land that we have acquired this year, Parliament slip, and a portion of it is reflected in the statement of financial activities, which we will go to next page. So in the statement of financial activities, we see the revenues and expenses. Revenues are slightly lower. That's only because we haven't requested anything from the city this year. We have made 2 requests for the Portlands. For the Portland's project from Canada as well as province, but they were made subsequent to the date of the financial statements, and they will be reflected in the March statements. So the revenue would be higher by March. Can we just go to 2 items that I will quickly like to go through in the notes? In the notes on page 51, we have an update on the credit facility. We have now reflected the revised borrowing limit of 90 million that we've secured in October 2022 from the, it's an increase from the 40 million that we had. It's the 90 million is now reflected in this note 8 for credit facility. And the last item that I would like to go through in the notes is on page 56, which is a new note that we have added to reflect the Quayside project agreement that was reflected. That's note number 23, which we have added to reflect the Quayside project agreement that was executed in December. The transaction, the phase 1 of the transaction is anticipated to close in March of this year, and subsequently the sales proceed and other financial impacts of the transaction will be reflected in the year-end statements. With that, I conclude the presentation on the statements. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Just on the credit facility, I know that we were last meeting still negotiating some terms around the I think the collateral. Is that all now fully resolved?
It's not completely resolved in terms of the security. The 90 million is in place and approved with the bank. We're still trying to resolve an issue related to the security and hope to have that resolved before the next committee meeting or a path to make sure that that's resolved on a timely basis.
Taking a bit of time, should we have some concern there?
No, we shouldn't have any concern. We still have access immediately to the original limit of 40 million. We don't have any requirement or need to draw down on it. We'll definitely have it resolved in advance of needing to use the facility.
Okay. Yeah, which is until what, 2026?
2 years. It's 2 years now. 2 years away.
Okay.
It's the forecast.
Okay. Thanks, Sampata. Any other questions there? Okay, let's move to the
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. The quarterly procurement report and the procurement policy update.
And we're joined today, Kevin, by our Director of Procurement, Marciana Boko. Answer any questions the committee may have on the item 4E, which is the quarterly procurement report, which is on the screen at the moment. And if not, we can move to item 4F, which is the procurement policy update.
No questions here.
I just had a quick question, Kevin, on the procurement. We're adding paragraphs on social procurement and sustainable procurement. Do we have any definitions behind those or how we define those?
What we included in the procurement policy is a requirement to include in the procurement process and documentation whenever possible and practical our goals for social procurement and community benefits, with consideration to proponent goals and strategies, accomplishments, plans for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and workforce development. I guess more details would go into the respective procurement documentation on a case-by-case basis.
If I can just add, Marciana, our ESG team is actually working on defining some template materials that would go into RFPs that would define exactly those things, Jeannie, so we can certainly share that at a future date.
Okay, I think it's important. It's just too broad right now and subjective.
Yeah, it's designed that way to be broad in the policy, and then we'll define it in terms of the tools as a separate template.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's valid for the sustainable procurement section as well. It's something similar.
Yeah, I think, Jeannie, we talked about that, and what we wanted to do is be relevant to the size of the procurement, right?
Drew has his hand up.
So just to follow on that, and thanks. And I went through it a few days ago. So a couple points is this is becoming increasingly de rigueur. I was looking at the RFQ for the high frequency rail procurement, and it shot through there, which appropriately. So kind of two questions. I presume that the language you're using is becoming increasingly standardized, and you're taking it from, you know, some expectation. I'd be intrigued which government, considering we're the one that has three. And that's one. And two, please remind me on Indigenous procurement, is there special language in there? There is quite often in federal procurements now, so I'm wondering about that. Thanks.
Marciana, I don't think we have anything specific to Indigenous in the procurement policy. What we do have is in the RFPs that we put out specifics, just as we did on Quayside, right? Expectations both on the environmental and on the Indigenous, and not just Indigenous, but any of the minority groups. So I think, you know, to the earlier comment, there is a general reference to the policy that we will have something in there, but the details will be very specific to the size of the procurement.
Okay.
Indeed, successfully, it was implemented in the recent Quayside RFP, and we took step forward on that. We're fully aware of what's the requirements of or this, I guess, the strategy that federal government is using when it comes to the Indigenous procurement, and looking into what provincial government the city is, and we're taking steps to implement something that would work for Waterfront Toronto. Not reflected currently, other than what you saw in the procurement policy right now. A future update, if necessary, to the policy will be made. But again, it's at the individual procurements level where it's the most important to be used.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Anything to add more there, Marciana? Or any other questions?
The only thing I would add is that the procurement policy itself does not include the procurement approval thresholds. Those are covered in the delegations of authority document that's actually approved by the Farm Committee and the board. So I just wanted to note that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, I'll turn the next three items over to you because I know we're going to deal with some of them in the closed session too, but the regulatory and compliance report, the fundraising dashboard, and the ESG update.
Sure. So item 4G, which is the regulatory and operational compliance report, which is on page 75. I'll happy to take that as read. With respect to item 4H, the fundraising dashboard on page 79, what I'd like to highlight is that updates were made to this dashboard based on feedback from the committee at the last meeting, including reflecting the cost of fundraising on the dashboard, which has been noted as 9% or 6% on an incremental basis. And then in terms of item 4I, which is the ESG update, want to highlight that we continue to progress. This is on page 80, Charmaine. We continue to progress the key initiatives that we outline here, including implementing key areas of our climate action plan, which includes exploring a net zero target for Waterfront Toronto. And part of that exploration includes establishing what our baseline greenhouse gas emissions are as a target for reduction, and then researching pathways to get to net zero, particularly for our construction projects. And as we mentioned, we recently amended our procurement policy to include sections on social and sustainable procurement at a high level. And our sustainability and innovation team is looking forward to providing a more fulsome ESG and climate action update at the March 27th upcoming board meeting. That's all I wanted to highlight this quarter.
And Kevin, as you mentioned, I'll get into any, and I'll get into more of the fundraising when we get to the other section.
Okay, any questions from any of the committee members there? Okay. We're now required to approve our external audit plan for this year, which if we go to that cover sheet and turn it over to BDO.
Yep, so we should be joined here today by Rob Claus and Jeff Barrett, who are partners with BDO, to present the external audit plan to the committee.
I see them both there, so
Good morning.
welcome Jeff and Rob.
Morning. Okay, I'm gonna take the lead here. So if you could flip to the 4th page of the document there. So just starting with the audit team. So Rob and myself and Jeff have been involved with the audit since BDO's taken over. Anthony Torelli is going to be the manager of the engagement. He's been involved for a few years now as well. And then Karen Trudeau is our quality assurance resource that we draw upon when needed. Next page, please. So just going over the audit timeline. So we've actually done our planning and interim back in December of 2022, just to get the file planned and started. We're planning to start fieldwork at the end of April 24th. We're planning to present the final report to you, the farm, May 25th, and then the ultimate approval is planned for June 12th, which is pretty consistent with past years in terms of timeline. Next page, please. So the next few slides, they're going to talk about just the auditor's responsibilities in our process, so, and then management's responsibilities. So in terms of the financial statements, so it's management's responsibility to produce the financial statements. We as auditors are producing an opinion on the financial statements. And through that process, just on the right-hand side, there's a section there just about the system of internal controls. So through our audit process, we do look at internal controls that relate to the financial statement process and systems related to that. And then we'll present our findings as noted on that last slide. We'll present our findings to the farm, any significant deficiencies if we were to find any in the internal controls, and then obviously key audit matters later on in May 25th, 2023. Next slide, please. So in terms of fraud, so our job as auditors is to look for material misstatements, whether they're caused by error or fraud. Unfortunately, if it is caused by fraud, there is a higher likelihood of not detecting it. So we just have to make you aware of that just due to potential collusion that may be involved. However, that being said, we do assess the risks of material misstatement due to fraud. We do certain audit tests to try to uncover any issues or suspected issues, and then we inquire with management. And then on the next slide, you'll see we'll obviously ask the farm to comment on this as well. But so I guess, yeah, I jumped ahead. I talked about some of this stuff here. So these are some of the procedures that we do when we're going through audit process with respect to fraud. Currently, us at BDO we're not aware of any fraud, and management hasn't made us aware of any fraud. But I just wanted to pass it over to the farm to comment if you are aware of anything at this point in time.
Not here.
Not here. Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, I will go on to the next section, which is probably the biggest part of the plan, the report here. So this next area here just talks about our key audit risks that we're going to focus more on than other areas of the audit. So revenue recognition obviously is a significant risk area for any audit. So we're going to focus more on testing that, confirming the contributions coming in, and any other source of revenues coming in is appropriately recorded. Management override of controls. So at any organization, management may be in a unique position to override certain controls. So there are certain things that we as auditors look at and test and discuss to try to cover that risk area off from an audit perspective. Land sales. So as waterfront has evolved over the past few years, there's more land sales occurring. So we obviously want to make sure that those are recorded correctly and reflected appropriately in the financial statements. So we look at the agreements, we test the costs involved and the revenues associated with it, just to make sure it's being recorded correctly. Next slide, please. And then these aren't high or significant risks, but these are other areas that we do focus a little bit on. So I won't touch on them in significant detail, but I'll just note the areas. So accrued liabilities, obviously, considering the significant construction that occurs within the organization, that's a large area that we focus in on and test. Assets under development, obviously being the largest item on the balance sheet, we want to make sure that those are being recorded appropriately. Construction deposits, contribution agreements, and any other project agreements. So we review each agreement as they're coming in each year, and we try to keep a good registry of them just to make sure we have a complete list of all the agreements. Obviously, each agreement is nuanced and can affect how things are recorded from an accounting perspective. So we want to review those and make sure things are recorded appropriately. Deferral of contributions and grants. So that's a large portion on the liability side. And then climate disclosures, as ESG and climate disclosures becomes more of an important matter with public entities. That's obviously something we want to review and make sure is disclosed appropriately. There's currently no reporting requirement to do it, but Waterfront has taken a conservative approach and has included it in the financial statements already, which is good to see. Next slide, please. In terms of materiality, so currently we plan for 4.5 million, which is based on 2% of total costs incurred. We average it over 3 years just to make sure there's less dips and highs in that materiality number, so that we're not going from 6 million one year down to 3 million another year, because that could cause issues from an audit perspective. We do have the ability to go even higher than 4.5, but based on previous conversations with the farm and management, we tended to keep it a little bit lower than our maximum threshold. I assume that's still going to be okay, but if not, please reach out to Jeff and I, or if you had a comment here, then please mention that. But next slide, please. Actually, maybe two more. Next slide, actually. So one thing I just wanted to note, Jeff and I had touched on this at last year's ending meeting, but there is a big change in the audit world. It's called CAS 315. And essentially what it is in the past, when we looked at an audit, we would have to assess risks based on the organization as a whole. And now what we have to actually do is we have to go into each financial statement line item and assess risks. So management's not seeing a large amount of difference in terms of the audit. It's a lot of behind the scenes and reconfiguring our audit file. Most of that has been done already in December, but we just want to make you as the farm aware that there is a large change in the audit process and the risk assessment process. So
is it, in your view, Rob, is it standards for standard purposes, or is it actually making a material impact in the quality of your audit process?
I would say a little bit of both. So the biggest driver of this change, well, there's two things. One is there's a lot of change in the IS related field. So as you can imagine, and Waterfront's sort of ahead of the game in this respect, but a lot of entities are becoming more technology focused. So the new standard actually requires a little bit more work on the IS front, which is good because the changes that are occurring with many companies. But then the other thing too is with this risk assessment process that I had just mentioned, it actually allows you to really scale up or down depending on the organization and the risks involved. So it actually does lead to a more quality audit. So that would be my opinion. Yeah.
I'll just add 2 cents on this topic. So we used to plan an audit based on a library of tests, and we'd pull all these tests out and make sure that we had 50 tests in our audit plan, for example. Now, when we look at the risk standpoint, we're able to potentially cut out some of those tests if there's not a specific risk that would relate to a specific item that a test would cover. So it allows us to increase the testing around specific items and decrease the testing on things that might be not material or the risk assessment might be low. We'd still test them, but we used to test to a level of 1, 2, or 3 in our audit plan. So sometimes 2 was the standard, 3 was if there was a significant risk, and there didn't used to be 1. Now we can audit to a level of 1 on something that would be deemed to be less of a risk. And we could, even if something's not a significant risk, but we think there's an area of concern or something we want to do a little more testing on, we would test to a level of 3 instead of 2 on some of those items. So there is a bit of make work to it because we're kind of, planning from backwards forwards now compared to how we used to do it. But as Rob said, it does give us the ability to focus our testing a little bit better.
Okay,
Go ahead, Rob.
No, and I was just going to say that's our report. So there's actually nothing else for us to go over.
Okay, any questions there? Or I think we have to approve this. Do we not, this external audit plan?
Yeah, you do.
Correct.
Is there a motion there on the screen, or you can add?
Yeah, can we get Charmaine, please?
There we go. So there's the approval to approve the plan. Can I get a motion on that? Jeannie,
Happy to move it.
seconded by Drew. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thanks, Rob and Jeff, for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. The next in BDO is welcome to stay on since this is a change in accounting policy, but I assume you've signed off on this already. This is a little bit esoteric, but important. So Lisa, can you explain this to the members of the committee?
Absolutely. So management is proposing a change in accounting policy that will impact our year-end financial statements. It relates to the land development costs that we capitalize as assets under development, and specifically the timing of when we expense those costs. So these are costs related to bringing the land to market. So our development team staff costs, for example, any soil, environmental costs, things of that nature. Under the revised accounting policy, we're proposing that these costs be expensed sooner than before. So really what we're proposing is that the costs be expensed in line with when we recognize the revenue for our developments and calculate the expense based on a proportion of cumulative land sale revenues that we realize. Previously, we were effectively deferring these costs until the final development within a precinct was completed. And we feel that this proposed change provides users of the financial statements with better financial information, and it's a better match in terms of costs to revenue recognition. So we've outlined the impact to our March 31st financial statements on the next page on 116. And as Kevin mentioned, we have reviewed this proposed change with our external auditors, BDO, who are here today, and they support our recommendations and our conclusions. And Zapata is also here, and either of us are happy to answer any questions.
Makes sense, Lisa.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Just lining up cost to revenues, really.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, any discussion there? Anything, nothing for us to be concerned of here, Jeff, I take it?
No, nothing to be concerned. Sampath and Lisa, Rob and I have had a couple of different conversations over this for the last month or two. Sampath has written a couple of memos for us for our file, and we're in agreement with it. It follows the handbook. I think realistically, it more accurately reflects what the organization does now. That policy was written basically back in 2002. The organization has evolved since then, and this makes a lot more sense from a presentation standpoint and from a cost recognition standpoint. Otherwise, we're going to be left with a significant, hit to the statement of operations when each precinct is done. Even though, most of at least any of the recognized revenue for things that would be sold over the course of the precinct finishing up would be recognized in previous years. So this is much better.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion there, can I get a motion to make this change? Lori, thank you, and seconded by Jeannie. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Appreciate that. Made it easy for us to understand. Our Mr. Kirstern is on holidays this week, so I know Julius is going to take over with the Portlands update, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll go through this fairly quickly and assume it's been read, but there's some colorful images in here, so we're going to spend a little bit of time just bringing up to date on where we are. Let's move forward. Progress on site. The scenario overview of the project overall. Key features to look at here is the shape of the river forming up nicely. Towards the top of the screen, you see the sediment management area, and then directly below that, you have the ice management area in that V shape. There's a further detail of that. So work on site continues to progress well. Next. We have a video. So this is an aerial that's fairly recent. Looking at the river valley, you can see that it's clearly taken shape now with wetlands formed up on either side of the river valley. You see Cherry Street South in place and now being used. To the left of the screen, you see the Canoe Cove area of the project. So we've carved out land and established these small islands and put in place softening of the grading to provide access to water. Now we're following along the dock wall where MT35 was. The reinforcement to the dock walls have been completed. In the background, you see a large amount of soil storage from across the broader site. Some of that is specifically in place for preloading of the ground to accommodate settlement. We're now in the Cherry Street Lakefill area. We just passed the fish habitat, which has been hugely successful. And it's got some fair bit of interest in the media. We're now moving to the Keating Channel. You can see the two bridges that are in place now, one for vehicular use, the other for ultimate transit use. We'll put that on hold for the time being by way of access. In the background, you can see the old Cherry Street Bridge that will be removed when new Cherry Street is opened. We're now moving along Keating Channel. And you can see some of the buildings that remain along Villiers Street, which is towards the right and center of the screen. To the left at the top, you're seeing bits of the sediment management area. That area is all part of controlling flow. So we're widening or lengthening the bridge and widening the river mouth in that area. Directly opposite that, we have the north plug. So here we're spinning back towards the sediment management area. So we'll be following the Gardner more or less by way of excavation, and we've set this up so that we don't interfere or impact the existing Gardner piles and piers. Here we can see the framework and foundations for the new Lakeshore Bridge being put in place for the west or eastbound lanes. We're now rotating towards Don Roadway. So this is part of the flood protection structure being put in place through a valley wall feature or rather landform. This is now the Commissioner Street Bridge that's in place. The background in the upper left, we see the overflow to the river. So in the case of a major flood event, water will be diverted to that, providing 3 outlets for water in a major storm event. We're now looking back towards the south west. This is the South River area, which will be graded down and leveled as we complete the project. Now looking back down the river towards the new river mouth where the Cherry Street Bridge is in the distance. I think these images give a good idea of the size of the site. It's about 250-acre site. Again, the designs are to withstand about 2/3 of the volume of Niagara Falls by way of flow in a major storm event. So a lot of the work that was done is not seen at the surface. This is below grade and reinforcing the river pattern. This is a key shot in my view because it shows the sight lines that will be available to residents that move on to Villiers Island. So it's pretty spectacular.
What's that channel just to the right there?
It's a temporary drainage channel that we have through the Cherry Street lake fill. That'll be filled in and replaced as we put the Promontory Park North onto that site over time. Any questions?
Terrific video, really fascinating.
Well, we look forward to, have you been on a tour yet?
I have. I enjoyed it very much. You really got a feel for it. And it was cool to be able to see the things that one day nobody will ever know are really under the river or under the soil. So
I had a tour just before Christmas as well. It was great. Thank you.
All right, well, we hope to have you back in the spring because over each quarter now until completion, the steps that you're going to see will be massive increments because there'll be finished areas that people can see and understand better. We'll go through a couple of quick images. This is Canoe Cove, a little more detail showing how the islands are being shaped up. So it's quite soft compared to the old dock walls. Next. Same. Now here we had some habitat. Now we've got habitation with various forms of wildlife coming back to the site. It really is amazing how quickly they start to settle back in. Next. Shot across Commissioner Street Bridge. So we are finishing off the servicing of Commissioner Street. We'll get that paved and it'll be opened later this year. Next. This is looking north. It's interesting here because there's 2 bridge sections. The one directly to the right is where the river passes, and then on the left there is a wetland underneath that area. And in a major storm event, both get filled up with water. So again, it gives you an idea of the scalability. Next. This is the ice management area. Talk about reinforcement. So these are massive rocks that are being put in place. We've designed this so that ice will build up in this area, and with the pressures applied by the ice, this type of structure prevents it from being pulled apart by the movement of the ice. So it's quite robust. Next. We're in the river valley proper. Here we've got different types of features assembled. In the center, you see timber with the root wads that'll be part of the river itself. Again, creating fish habitat and providing flood protection as they stabilize the banks. Next. We've completed now, but this was underway, a cutoff wall at the west plug, so we can now begin excavation around that plug, getting ready to open up the river valley to the lake, which will be in early 2024. We'll flood the river valley from the lakeside, harbor side, and then at the end, pull the plug at the north by the Keating Channel, allowing water to start to flow. So we want some time to allow the planting to take root. Next. These are the new bridge piers that have been put in place. So we've modified a couple and we're putting 2 new ones in, and then we'll be excavating underneath the new bridge structures as we move to the west. So we've gone from 2 bay openings to 4, and are deepening the area as well to accommodate the flows that we need for a flood event. Next. This is in the sediment management area. You can see the new dock wall that's been placed inland. Will be leaving some of the existing dock wall in place, but lowering grades where you see the existing equipment. So that'll be all underwater, accommodating the increase in flow required. Next. An overview of planned work through the year. There's no real change in this plan from what we put forward previously. I do highlight the opening of Commissioners and the opening of Cherry Street North. That will change the views of the site significantly for the public, so we're anxious to get that done. Next. In terms of work tendered and accomplished to date, this is looking back to December. So we've had significant contract awards done. We've got procurement in progress, and we had a small amount, 6.8% left to be tendered. So we're now into that work. Next. Moving forward, again, we'll continue with the procurement to wrap up remaining works. We're keeping in mind how we need to get this addressed to deal with our budget concerns. Next. Complaints remain relatively low overall. Biggest issue is always the traffic congestion. It has been quite frustrating in that there has been work being done outside of our forces by Enbridge, separate utility on their own, which has caused closures and massive traffic delays along Lakeshore. We've had to deal with some of that. It's unfortunate, but again, it's not been our doing. So we're managing the best we can and assisting the city as best we can with these problems. Next. Engagement with Indigenous communities is ongoing. I don't know if we want to get into detail on this, but we can take that up when required. This has been ongoing since the project's commencement and continues. Next. Our communications and public engagement continue. We will be opening up a viewing tower across the site again in the spring so that people can come visit the site and get a view of the river valley from a higher elevation. And then with the Cherry Street North Bridge opening, we'll have an event to address that as well. Any questions?
Kevin, if I can just jump, oh, sorry, go ahead, Judy.
I was just saying, great work, Julius. The other thing I would add is with the spring coming, I've been down there on one of our 10-degree weather days this year on my bike. And I think bike signage could be improved. I know my way around, but I'm just thinking in the spring as people, you know, start to get out more. And the other thing I noticed is there's a ton of Ellis Dawn signs, but I don't see any Waterfront Toronto signs.
I look for those carefully. When you look at the screening on all the fences.
Oh, I know, but Ellis Dawn is like massive on those concrete pillars, and there should be there be like federal government sign and a provincial government and a city or anyway. But great work, looks really good.
It's a good point.
I'll look
into both. Are good points.
When you're down there, it just looks like a big Ellis Dawn project. And I know it's on those banners, but they're all dirty as well from all the construction. And anyway, just a couple of suggestions as we move to the spring.
Yeah, Cameron and I will look at what we can do there.
Okay, thank you. You know, one thing that did come to mind was we do have a hoarding that you know was painted originally. It showed the width of the river. And we might go back and touch that up before, you know, in the springtime, because it shows where the opening is going to be. And we can tie that into public relations. Money's tight.
The Kevin, if I may, the opening of the bridge, I should point out, I was at the top 100 projects dinner. I was invited, one of the two had tables where it was all the big construction companies and the major projects across the country. And I got a chance to talk to a lot of the people who were very, quite frankly, very amazed at the work that we've done. So it's becoming much more prominent. Certainly the opening of the bridge made a big difference because people could start to see the project. I think we'll look at the viewing tower and we'll talk a bit about, you know, how we improve our communications in terms of trying to bring more attention to the work that's being done. The other thing I should point out is at the other table, I introduced myself to the new acting mayor and had a good chat for a good while at the dinner with her. And she was already familiar. She did a tour. We talked a lot about the projects that we are undertaking, but the Portland's being one of the major ones. She was interviewed the next morning talking about how excited she is to be a mayor of such an exciting city. And when they asked, well, what is it that excites you? She actually answered the work on the waterfront as one of the things that excites her. So, I think we'll continue. I've offered to engage with her. I told her I know she's quite busy right now, but happy to brief her up on all of our work. And she was very interested in the work we're doing. So it's a good start.
Yeah, just Julius, is it possible? I get asked all the time, I'm sure all the board members do, but what's going on down there? It would be great to have that video to show people the drone flyover. Is that possible for you to share that with the board in a form that we can show it at dinner parties and idle discussions?
It's actually on the internet through YouTube, and we have it on our website as well, but we'll forward you a link and we'll send that out to the board members so you can have direct access.
I think it's the time. Well, it's always been the time, but more so now, where we need to be the spokespeople for what's going on down there and continue the education process. I found that as Laurie said, great video just to get a sense of the scale and scope of the project.
We update these every quarter, so what we'll do then is send them out when we get them ready by quarter to the board for that type of use. Okay,
that'd be great.
To do it with a drone, presumably.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a drone. Yeah.
Julius, on the video that you're posted, is there a narration, like an explanation of what people are seeing? Kind of like you provided that to us live, but
yeah,
if you're just a member of the public, you wouldn't really know what you're looking at necessarily.
So it's a little bit simple, but there's normally either a vocal overview with some graphics or just graphics. So as the images go by, you'll have a little note. It'll say what it is. This is the Canoe Cove, for example, as the flyby takes place. So we'll have a look at that and see if we get you the right version. Typically, the YouTube versions do have those pieces added.
But maybe, Cameron, we can take a look to see what we can do.
That's exactly what we do.
Well, maybe you guys could do like a running narrative as the drones, like what you did for us.
Happy to. So we'll look at that.
But to Laurie's earlier point, it is great to see the work that was undertaken as it's happening, because, I got a chance to walk with Julius and David when the riverbed was dug right up. I mean, we filled half of it now. Like, you really appreciate how much work went into just even digging it up and how deep it was. So I think having some of these historical backdrops of the progress underway is great.
And we do refer people to the photographic archive that we're putting together. Again, it's on site, and it goes back to the project beginning with photos of the excavation taking place that George has talked about and the various steps we've gone through in development. So we'll provide that link as well. Okay, Cam?
All right.
All right.
Okay, that's a great visual update. Any other questions there? Another item for you, Julius. We have the approval of the Broadview East flood protection update there. Can you fill us in on what's happening?
All right, I'm not going to go through this in grinding detail, but the high and low of it is that there is a further project that we're going to show graphically in a moment. It is a portion of land which currently accommodates the BMW dealership and another car dealership, which is just north of the rail line. And that is adjoining the Cadillac Fairview Unilever development site on one side, the river on the other, and then Eastern Avenue running across at the north. Because of changes in the design of the rail line and removal of large portions of the rail bank that served as flood protection in our EA and related design schemes, it's caused us to revisit that and look at an alternate solution, moving flood protection out closer to the river. So we're going to talk about that today. And this is a piece of work that's been assigned to us by the city to implement. So it's funded by the City of Toronto. And we are the agent on their behalf in designing and constructing the same. So today we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to ask for your approval related to the engagement of a constructor. We've decided on an approach to take, which I'm going to go through with you now.
So this project's critical to the East Harbor and Ontario line. Flood
Yes.
protection, right?
Yes. So without this done, under current legislation, East Harbor can't be occupied, nor would the train station be able to be occupied. Okay, let's move into it. Next. So again, I've touched on what we're looking to do today, but we want to talk about procurement for a contractor for this program. Next. The site itself is the BMW site, as I've touched on. The program is called the Broadview Eastern Flood Protection Project. Again, Toronto, TRCA, and Waterfront Toronto working on this jointly with us as the implementation agent. Next. This is the overall site. The boundary for this program, covers off that area. I'm going to get into some of the details of what that entails. On this drawing, again, it's just showing what happens by way of flood protection upon total completion of the program. The section lines relate to a drawing that isn't included here, but provide a cross section of the land assembly that's similar to what we've done in places along Don Roadway in particular to provide the required flood protection. Next. Bit more detail here. Work involves replacement modification of the existing ramp onto the Don Valley Parkway to the north. That's that ring section at the top of the plan. Then the brown line shows the cap of the assembled flood protection landform. In this case, and as we start the program, we leave the dealership in place and work around that building. It's not a huge grade change, so it can be accommodated. So we are working with the dealership to see how we can deal with this best. In the simplest of terms, you have a ramp approaching the building, you hit a cap and then you drop back down. They may elect and we may work with them to look at different types of grading solutions that level that out a little better. Next. I should note that ultimately the plan is to remove the BMW dealership in time and move the flood protection landform out to follow the line of the river to maximize long-term development value on the site. That'll be done by the city later in conjunction with the landowner. Part of the program is the removal of the old Eastern Avenue Bridge, so that's the last piece missing that we've referred to in earlier due diligence work. Next. This is how it fits into the broader program. Number 6 is the Unilever site. And then we see the rail work at number 3. That's the new GO and subway station for the new line. Number 5 is the site that we're dealing with in particular. And then this also requires coordination with the design and construction of the Broadview extension, which ultimately will get passed through underneath the rail station and through the Unilever site, moving down to ultimately Commissioners. Next. So at this time, we've got approval to get to 60% design, so that work is underway. We've retained design consultants. Morrison Hirschfield is doing that work for us currently. It is complicated, more so than simply the construction of the landform. Much like the Portland's flood protection project, there's a vast amount of utilities that are live or abandoned that run through the site. In particular, there are old oil lines that we have to deal with, which are particularly complex by way of approval. And then we can't be doing anything that impacts the flood protection program we have currently underway. So we need to work through that balancing act hand in hand with Metrolinx, Cadillac, Fairview, and our ongoing PLFP work. We've also retained BTY already separately through vendor of record to provide cost consulting for us on this program. So it's a different role for BTY on this project as opposed to what they're doing on PLFP. Next. So we looked at, what needed to happen, and we want early engagement with the contractor because of the complexity of the project. How do we build this? How do we accommodate the landlord? How do we get that constructability feedback early into the process? But we went through analysis looking at different types of procurement and engagement, when and how. We're going to touch on that as we go through this. Next. So we've gone through a series of options. I'm not going to go through those individually. I'm assuming there is red unless you have questions. Let's move on. Next. 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 Then we did an analysis based on inputs related to the different approaches outlined. And we came out slightly ahead with CMGC, which is construction management, general contractor. Long and short of it, under this type of arrangement, we enter into an agreement with a construction manager at an agreed fee and a projection for cost for general conditions, which is, fixed costs that they need to deal with to deliver the project, primarily focused on staff and at times select pieces of work. It's a relatively small percentage of the overall project, let's say in the 15% range in this program. Maybe slightly higher. The balance of work then is tendered in tender packages at different times that allow us to tender sequentially and deliver the work faster. Then we have the option of rolling the contract into a guaranteed maximum price at any point that cost lowering as the risk reduces. So we're carrying highest risk at the beginning, and then we'll assess if we feel it appropriate to roll into a GMP. Next. So that was our conclusion. This provides us line of sight through the CM process. There's no opportunity for the contractor then to negotiate separate terms or agreements with the vendors. We have transparency to how they're billed, how they're paid, and what the scope of work is. There's good and bad to that, but we're comfortable with it. Next. So the recommendation is to proceed with CM procurement based on our requirements. We need that approval from farm to proceed. So it would be a construction manager with a guaranteed maximum price option to look at. Next. And the motion.
Oh, if you go back to the motion, please. Thank you.
Any questions?
Julius, can you remind me again, what's the project management fee that we're charging to manage this work?
On this one, we've got to work that through in further detail. Keep in mind, Ginny, the numbers have changed materially because of the same escalation we've seen on PLFP. So there was a 29% market increase across the board for construction work in 2022. That will impact all the other work because of multipliers. So we'll have to report back on that.
But in terms of what's our fee, are we charging like an industry standard 7-8% project management fee or?
For our work. Yeah, we are charging a fee in terms of percentage. Again, I've got to work what that'll be out. We are a little bit above market because of the nature of the program and because of the reporting we have to do. This is unusual. The type of reporting with 3 levels of government and the governance structure that we have in place makes it more cost intensive, time intensive. So we'll be above market, but not materially.
Okay, so really this project, it's going to cover our costs.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, it's all cost recovered and it's paid for by the city.
And does this work need to be done in order and completed in order for our PLFP project to be flood protected?
Ultimately, yes.
So basically, if we finish our work, but they haven't finished their work, technically we aren't flood protected until they finish their part.
The north end isn't, right?
Well, no, we're actually in pretty good shape. If we finish our work and this work isn't done, then there is minor flooding. And by that, I mean at the side of the road, we've got a map of this actually, but it shows a bit of excess water by the curbs. in a few areas, but no material flooding. The real issue comes when they punch the hole through the landform that's supporting the rail embankment. So if that isn't dealt with, then you've got a problem.
Right.
Okay, but we're managing this whole process, so presumably we have a little bit more control
Yeah.
Yes,
in
Yeah.
coordinating the two. Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
That's one, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, it's one of the reasons the city has us doing it so that we align the two projects, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was actually going to poke at that. That makes sense. Let me just ask a detailed question, Julius, and that is, you mentioned that the Eastern Avenue Bridge is coming down. Is that right? That flyover kind of thing? So what's happening there? Because Eastern Avenue, are we rebuilding the bridge in the context of the Gardner moving, or how does that?
No. This is an old bridge that's been abandoned for some time.
Oh,
So it's,
that bridge. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yes.
yeah, I did the same thing. Oh,
Yeah, it's
that
a small
bridge.
abandoned one. Yeah.
It's a relic from decades ago. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some services mounted on that bridge. So part of this program then is relocating and
moving the
burying those.
services, yeah.
Okay. Right.
Question?
Yeah, can you speak a little bit to traffic impacts? Did these worsen as a result of this work and how that's being managed? I mean, as an East Ender myself, it's really, really difficult. And I think you'll hear from people if this further complicates what's already taking place.
There will be challenges for sure. To be blunt, the biggest problem we've had has been, other utilities doing work that we don't control. So that Lakeshore fiasco that's been, causing absolute misery at times is out of our control. Outside of that, we do put together carefully managed traffic plans that should reasonably accommodate flow. The problem we'll face here and we've currently faced is you currently have 4 to 6 lanes of traffic moving in one direction or the other before the Lakeshore bridges were removed. So you wind up with that bottleneck that causes a problem. This will do that to some extent as well. Shouldn't be worse than what it is now.
But Laurie, to your point, there will be, and part of the challenge here is, as Juice has pointed out, city has projects going on at the same time. Utilities have projects going on at the same time. And then we have a project going on. So there are going to be complaints. And of course, the public has no clue who's doing what. They're just not happy with the volume of construction all occurring at the same time. And I do
Laura,
know
you just need to move. Come here to the West End.
Well, Lori, the one thing I could suggest is that we do share traffic information with the city. And there's other, we look at sensitivities on a broad basis, like with PLFP, and actually went up as far as the 401. So there are some routes that come out of that traffic modeling, which I could share with you quietly. So you might take this road or that road at a specific time. It might make your life a little easier.
But we also
No, I'm a transit rider, so I'm good. But
You're good, yeah. But it is an issue for sure.
my neighbors just don't like it. And fair enough. It really is kind of a disaster.
So when you talk to them, just keep saying Enbridge.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's the update. And we just need
There's
the
the motion
motion
in front of
approved.
us. Yeah, can I get a motion on motion to approve the motion? Thanks, Drew. All in favor? Okay, full steam ahead on that project.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Great report. Over to BTY next on the report of the Capital Monitor. So.
No,
No,
it's,
no, no.
MNP on the
MNP first.
internal audit update.
BTY will be later in the
Closed.
meeting.
In the closed session.
Oh, sorry, did I skip ahead?
Nope.
Okay,
Item 9.
Right.
item 9, okay, yep. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
We have a short update today. So we'll provide a status update on the internal audit plan, and then we've provided for your information the planning memo on the current review that's underway. So if you go to the next slide, I'll go through this is the internal audit plan status update. So as you can see, for the 2022-23 year. We've completed that first review, which we presented at the last farm. And so we are in progress on the second one there, looking at the ERP procurement process. So we're right in the middle. We've completed interviews, received some information, and just have a few more items to complete. And we'll be planning to bring that review to the farm in May. The next audit will still focus on the ERP system, and we're going to look at robotic process automation and if there's what opportunities there are to use that within the finance, accounting, and PMO areas. And then going to the next years, you could see for 23-24, we have cybersecurity, which will be coming up, and then looking at accessibility. And then if there's no questions on that, the next item that we provided for your information is the planning memo of that current ERP procurement process. So you can see the objective and the scope of that. So we're really going to focusing on looking at approval workflows and thresholds within the ERP system, understanding length and stages of the approval process, and looking at ways to improve and better streamline procurement processes within the ERP. That's it. This is a short and sweet internal audit update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay, hearing
Thanks,
none.
Veronica.
Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
And in efficient time, I'm ready to take a motion to go into closed session. Okay, thanks, Jeannie. Seconded. Okay, let's move to closed session. Okay, I'll take first a motion to approve the draft minutes of the last closed session of the Farm Committee on November 24th. Take that from Jeannie, seconded by Lori. All in favor? Okay, those minutes are carried. And then we need an approval on the motion in front of us, which is really recommending it to the board. So can I have that motion? Drew, seconded by Lori. All in favor? Okay, that motion is carried as well. Is there any other items that we have not covered that before we let everyone go, except for BTY? Okay,
I think we're good.
Motion to adjourn formally.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll continue on for a few minutes here. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, management.
Thanks. Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. Bye.